Have a powerful evening, everyone. Today, Zelensky once again stated that the war will most likely continue for another 2 to 3 years. And Angela Merkel said, by the way, that no, not 2, 3 years, but 10 years, and only after that will Ukraine become strong, independent, just, and sovereign. Basically, you can use whatever adjective you find appropriate. So far, the situation with this sovereign and wonderful country where the economy is developing is as follows. Here is the highway from Odessa, and there are abandoned cars here. Why do you think they were abandoned? I once showed similar videos and it turned out that the military recruitment officers near gas stations were grabbing citizens and pulling them out of their own cars. And accordingly, the cars were left standing on the roadside. Here the situation is different. People are abandoning their cars to cross into Moldova. Along this road, even though it's fenced off and everything, as I understand it, it's still a relatively accessible area through which you can still cross into Moldova. But why are there only 4 cars here? Obviously, the cars are being removed somewhere every day. Where to and why? That's another matter. I mean, why? That's clear. But where to? That's still a question. Most likely, they are being expropriated by the state. That's what I think. That's as far as the prosperous state is concerned. Then there's Mama's Boy, which is some kind of press something, another barbershop hipster who's never been to war, except maybe with an entourage somewhere on the 10th line. But the female journalists on the main channel, of course, it's the TV marathon. They tell the whole inside story of the front and the war in general. It turns out we'll be fighting for a long time. I think it seems they're all Ukrainians. Well, like us. I mean someone, but definitely not the female journalist, of course, with that character.
I'll continue. It will continue. Ukrainian authorities should be honest and open with Ukrainians and proceed from the premise.
The same applies to the Ukrainian authorities' honor.
That if you want to live in this country, then each of you must serve and have basic military training. Each of you must be ready, sooner or later, to defend the country.
Everyone should be ready to defend the country from kindergarten. Apparently their beloved state, not the country itself. And for that, you need to send your children, donate, and do whatever it takes. As long as the state, represented by people like this, stays safe. By the way, the journalist is interesting. Every time, no matter who is speaking, whether it's some patriot or not, she looks at them as if her conversation partner, excuse my language, messed themselves. She always has that expression. I have no idea why. Maybe she's tired of the TV marathon, or maybe she likes it but dislikes the people. That's just how she seems. Kids are learning tactical medicine in schools. Yeah.
In schools, children should be learning tactical medicine.
Why not strategic medicine? By the way, in schools, girls used to study medicine and also cooking, like how to cook and embroidery. Boys used to assemble rifles there. There was this and that. But this one, from childhood, judging by the width of his face, is preparing to be a partisan. You know, the deeper into the forest, the wider and thicker the partisans get. Or the wider our faces, so to speak, the thinner our ranks. Apparently, in hopes of this, they conduct tactical training for such hosts, such press secretaries, so that they can support the ranks. But so that no one falls out of these ranks. So, if you have a wide face, you'll support Bob, your comrade, and maybe someone from the Cossacks or someone else, and no one falls out. The center of all this is, of course, Dick, and here, without Dick, nothing works at all.
In every new house that's built, there is always what's called a life capsule. The principle of war of attrition is simple. Either they get us or we get them.
Yeah, war of attrition, I get it. Either they get us or we get them. It's all clear. An interesting concept from someone who's never fought in a war and says we or they. Well, it's not really them, but the word we compared to we the people doesn't include those characters.
The Ukrainian nation must prepare for a war of attrition, and only those ready to live here should be prepared for it.
That's right. And that's why I believe that anyone who is not ready to live in this country should be given the opportunity to return, or rather the opportunity to leave this state. Open the border and you'll see how many people will stay with you. Then you can defend as much as you want. For 100 years, 150 years, or even until the second coming. Guard, defend, do whatever you want.
There are very professional American analysts. For example, they estimate that in a situation like now, the Russian-Ukrainian war could last, for example, another 12 years.
Yes, they are obviously very talented analysts because, of course, Ukraine will definitely have enough funds, resources, and especially people for the next 12 years. You are already inviting tens of thousands of migrant workers from Pakistan, India, and other countries. What 12 years, man? What are you talking about? Even if Europe keeps giving money, and with the current level of funding, it's unlikely that Europe itself will last 12 years. No country can withstand such amounts. So what are we talking about? Talking about Ukraine? What 12 years? They'd be lucky to last another year. With the current level of outflow, brain drain, just the loss of young people and not so young people. But those who are, as they say, an economic unit, a social unit, without them, who will be there in 12 years? Will Pakistanis fight for you, leave for you? There. Well, you've just listened to another expert who says, we're going to be at war for a long time. And he's not the only one who thinks that way. I just closed what I was about to show you. The Economist thinks so too. It talks about what time frame Ukraine is preparing for. It turns out Ukraine is fighting two different wars at the same time. It is gradually winning one, but in the other it is still stuck. I don't know what the doctor says about this journalist who wrote the article, but probably nothing very good and probably something the journalist wouldn't like. Because the two wars he wrote about are actually one war. He just means the technological war, and Ukraine is winning. And here he says that the news from the front is the most encouraging in recent years. Commanders believe that Ukrainian troops, organized around drones, have found a formula that stops Putin's army's advance. 35,000 Russian soldiers are being withdrawn, not deployed. 50,000 are wanted. They are putting pressure on Russia. Then a certain Brigadier General Pavel Palets, who, by the way, is not only an advisor to the president but also a participant in the negotiation process, is skeptical about the Kremlin's ability to reach the administrative borders of Donbass by autumn. Long-range drone strikes play a much bigger role, especially against oil refineries and everything else. And it is also said that 95 such systems are being developed and produced by the Ukrainian defense industry itself. I would like to see the Ukrainian defense industry that produces electronic chips. Or at least the simplest resistors, surface mount components, capacitors, for example, or something like that. That's an interesting perspective. If these drones are assembled from spare parts like Lego, it doesn't mean they're developed and produced in Ukraine. It means that the same motherboards are ordered somewhere and then everything is assembled. Yes, the body can be printed on a 3D printer, or it might not be printed. If any specialists are here, explain how this is done. But it's absolutely certain that drones aren't made entirely in Ukraine. We can't state it any more clearly. And then it is also said that Viktor Orban, who lost the elections in Hungary in April, can no longer block aid to Ukraine. This is extremely interesting because the following is said in my Telegram channel. The new Prime Minister of Hungary, Magyar, will not meet with Zelensky until Ukraine resolves the issue of the rights of Transcarpathian Hungarians, said the press secretary of the Hungarian leader. And suddenly many things could come to light here. Magyar, if what he calls the violation of the rights of Hungarians continues, might block this very aid again. By the way, it hasn't been allocated yet. Somewhere there is a signed document, but no aid has actually been sent yet. Out of those 90 billion that were promised, not a single euro cent has reached Ukraine. Of course, maybe they've already been spent. Just like Preparedness and Zelensky's colleagues in the grand business from Europe, maybe not. Well, then they say everything seems fine, right? Everything is great and they're winning. There's victory here and there, but it turns out the home front has been hollowed out. Critical infrastructure is wearing out. Apparently we're talking about energy, water, sewage, and so on. Anti-missile defense is risky from a tank. They complain here about strikes on Kyiv, then about blackouts and everything else. We'll talk more about this today. Suddenly someone pops up. Guess who? Popping up in Pilipsk on the air. Who am I? Seems like 4 Ukrainians. Activist and advisor to the Ministry of Defense Taras Chmut. A good man was named Chmut. And this good man admits that energy concerns him now more than the front line. If I were in Chmut's place, I'd see a psychologist if something truly bothered me. I wouldn't pour out my worries on the pages of newspapers and magazines. I would go to a psychologist and I would say, "Doctor, help me not to worry so much." And Chmut will say that wars are waged not by the army but by society. If our faith in our ability to endure the war collapses, our will to fight will collapse as well. And then there's also the injustice of mobilization, internal politics, and a corruption scandal. For some reason, Zakon placed them at the very end, although in my opinion it is precisely the corruption factor that undermines the confidence of that very society that the good man Chmut mentioned. Confidence in that very victory. Because, well, it's like in sports. You put out a good athlete who knows how to play. It's a rough analogy, not a complete one. And next to him is some beginner. Moreover, someone who doesn't want to do anything, just wants to reap the glory. Well, this one runs around, does some tricks here and there. Headers, kicks, and this is a pass, for example, from a very difficult position. To this guy here. The character doesn't take this pass. Or he gives it to the opponent he made a deal with before the match. And he gets money for slacking off. You can't play well with an opponent like that, and in this analogy I would call the Ukrainian people the football player. An ordinary person who just wants to live and work, and that's why he works. Well, as for such a not very talented football player who besides that is also not very, let's say, agile, to be honest, well, you know yourself who that is. These are powerful leaders, including the one who was saying that we need to fight. 3 years, 4, 12 years, 20, 100 years, 150, basically until once again the second coming. Then the most interesting thing is the conclusion after the icons. Despite everything, most Ukrainians remain optimistic. Comrade journalist from The Economist, have you even talked to Ukrainians? If you talk to Zelensky or his deputy or the deputy's deputy who also has a cottage in Konchazaspa, or with some kind of barbershop warrior like Ukeles Tolstolobik or that character I'm just showing that's not, well, I wanted to say not Ukrainians. Well, in general, they're not the kind of Ukrainians you should talk to if you want to understand the general mood in society. They're completely different from what you imagine. Obviously, I don't think that journalist is watching me, but it would be interesting, of course. That's not the mood of Ukrainian society at all. It's not optimistic. Moreover, as soon as we get closer to autumn and especially to winter, you'll see such optimism that you wouldn't wish it on anyone. That's out of the question. As for Peremoga, as you know, Peremoga never comes alone. She always brings a child with her. Well, and Zelensky sent an urgent letter to Trump. At first, when I was reading it, I thought he was talking about victory, that US help isn't needed, that thanks, but no. And before that, he was saying that Trump is old, obsolete and all that, but now he's asking for help. He says that when it comes to missile defense, we rely on our friends. Suddenly, the US has become our friend. Just recently, all his talking heads were saying that the US are enemies and traitors. And now everything is just fine. When it comes to ballistic missile defense, we rely almost exclusively on the United States. But the United States has its own problem, it's Iran. They've gotten in up to their necks there, and now they're trying with all their might to get out of that quagmire. They're still struggling, and it's very difficult. Iran also isn't in a good situation. But in the situation where they ended up together with the US, Iran has nothing to lose. That's why they can act, let's say, in unexpected ways and not necessarily in kind. But the US has something to lose. In fact, it has a lot to lose. In this situation, you wouldn't want to be in Trump's shoes. Well, as for Zelensky, if he's asking to take those very missiles from the US, which they really need over there because they're probably actually running out, and give them to Ukraine, well, you'd have to be quite the genius for that. Moreover, the Ukrainian ambassador to the US, Olha Stefanishina, who by the way has a case opened against her by NABU and SAP, is sending a letter to the White House, to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, and to other members of Congress. The representatives of the Ukrainian authorities are dissatisfied with the current pace of deliveries under the Portrayal program. They don't want anything else. They say they want Patriot missiles and additional systems to stop Russian and other missile strikes. These Patriots with their systems cost about $1 billion, the launcher and the Patriots. What can Zelensky offer the US in return? Because, well, even Europe is unlikely to give that kind of money. If they do, of course, that's great, but Europe itself won't last long either. Again, remembering that Ukraine has almost no air defense to protect its own cities, Ukraine is inflaming the situation, escalating it. And here we proudly write Voronezh, Taganrog, and Tuapse. Tuapse again. Ukraine attacked several targets in Russia with missiles last night. They proudly report all this and show how complicated the situation is. They proudly show photos with smoke rising from something. And here there's smoke coming from something too. And there's also a video. Okay, that's Telegram, but we won't go there. But overall, nothing good. and Sevastopol as well. And the most interesting thing is, it's interesting that they say these cities celebrate the day of the USSR, the BSSR. I don't know what Ukraine is. Well, basically, it's some kind of sarcasm, irony. Naturally, there will be a response. Of course, they'll say again that, well, basically, it's just some endless cycle of violence that neither side is stopping. And the most interesting thing is that Ukraine is becoming more and more demanding. I mean, they gave them money, but they're even more demanding now. For example, here's a journalist. I saw this article. When someone from the Wall Street Journal writes that Trump's negotiators should come to Kyiv. I thought that, well, I mean, it's in the future tense, like they're going to come to Kyiv. It turns out that the journalist who translated this article, by the way, it's not as strict in the original, says that they are obliged to come. So it's not that they were invited, want to, or that Trump said they would come. No, they have to come in order to continue negotiations with Zelensky to discuss all this, and apparently once again to look at the destroyed houses as if they haven't seen them before. Recently they showed the destroyed houses to some European delegations. They saw them and felt sorry for the people and the damage. But seeing it in person isn't the same as seeing photos. Another victory is that even in the summer, power outages might return in Ukraine. They're asking us where the situation will be the most difficult. In the summer, they might introduce hourly power outages again in case of a sharp rise in temperature and peak load on the energy system. The specialist who voiced this idea, not just an idea, but possibly the future, said that the situation remains most stable in nuclear energy. And here, the generation will be more or less normal. The situation is more complicated in thermal generation, since some facilities have been damaged and their restoration requires time and significant resources. Things aren't going so well with hydropower, although equipment is being restored at the damaged stations. And the regions with the highest electricity consumption are the industrial ones: Kyiv, Odessa, Dnipro, Kryvyi Rih, and Kharkiv. Here, backup power sources and cogeneration units are now being installed, that is, additional ones to ensure the operation of critical infrastructure. And if there is also a heat wave, the problems in these regions could be greater than the national average. Let me remind you that Kryvyi Rih is Zelensky's hometown, but Kyiv is Zelensky's current hometown, and Odessa, well, apparently just for window dressing. And besides, again, this equipment and these units, the modules of the energy infrastructure, yes, they are being restored. Honor and praise to the utility workers who work tirelessly, even though I understand that they are most likely kept under pressure, forced to work, because if their exemption is removed, they'll be sent to the front. These guys are doing everything they can, basically. They restore everything, but the same night there could be another strike. Well, then they have to restore everything again, but there aren't that many spare parts, and I don't just mean some screws, bolts, washers, or something like that. No, I mean the modules themselves, like the turbines. Turbines are ordered separately. It's not some standard product with a specific... Well, of course there are some like that, but if we're talking about a large nuclear power plant or a thermal power plant, the turbines there are sometimes custom made. Not always, but ordering one like that is expensive, there's a long wait, and then you still have to install it somehow, and the specialists have been taken to the front. What to do in such a situation, where to turn, it's extremely hard to say. And plus, there's one more victory. And what's that? This is an ongoing battle with common sense for the whole Polish crew. Some kind of language that they've turned Ukrainian into, and now they keep introducing words like this etera, Svetlani, Litovishche. I think give it 5 more years. And those who spoke classic Ukrainian, well, for example, Ukrainian is my language, whether you consider it my first or second. I speak it just as well as Russian, and of course I understand it just as well, and I write in it and everything. But now, when I sometimes listen to this sort of Polish Surzik, there are some things I don't understand well anymore. I mean, I get the general meaning, but honestly I get lost with some individual words. Some strange ones pop up. Well, I've been to Lviv a few times and a few times to Zakarpattia. They have some special words there that are taken from Hungarian, Romanian, and Polish languages. They use them there, change them a bit, and that's their local dialect. That's completely normal, but when a dialect that's barely familiar to an average person from Ukraine is made the main one, that's already extremely strange and naturally causes, a lot of questions, let's put it that way, which even our own, can't answer. Even our Ministry of Rhetorical Questions, Golden Scales, Goethe, Milk Scream. Well, so what now? Now let's take a look at the powerful leaders. We'll invite them now. First, probably this specialist from Russia will comment on everything I've said about the situation in Ukraine.
We are completely satisfied with our work, but unfortunately our work did not yield any results.
The work did not yield any results, so yes, nothing seems to be working out. Ah, so what? Well, who should we start with? Fadina. Fadina says that Telegram is bad.
And Telegram, it's just there, that's it. Where, what, how, it's very hard to figure out. What, how, it's very hard to figure out. What, how, it's very hard to figure out.
You need to put on power glasses because it's impossible to listen to Fadina without them. I recommend putting them on because the ionizing radiation of power penetrates all the way through. Now, by the way, I'll show you what can happen if you spend too long listening to Fadina. Here. So don't listen to Fadina without protective glasses. As soon as you put them on, these consequences disappear immediately. Everything is safe and everything is great. But let's move on to her.
We're the top channels and no one needs to stand behind them. That's just how it is.
That's just how it is. Well, somewhere out there.
That's how it is. Leveno.
My mother is a memory of regulation. And people who move around, maybe those are mirages as well.
My mother is a memory of protection and assurance. And all this should be controlled by such a specialist, the greatest on the internet and in IT technologies like Fadina, who is a creative person, travels there, sings for Ukrainians somewhere abroad too, sings for Ukrainians in Ukraine as well. I don't know who goes to her concerts, and at the same time she also understands internet regulation standards. Really, a talented person is talented in everything, especially with such a tattoo. Those people who are pushing this rhythm
might be in some way.
Another specialist on the right, the one who used to host some kind of erotic, program many years ago. Now she's also a journalism specialist and an internet regulation expert. Well, since they're discussing this.
We're being dragged toward legalization. I don't understand why such channels, maybe it's more complicated in your regular WhatsApp. Why can't they be created in WhatsApp? WhatsApp, or rather the Ukrainian resource, Fadina. Create your own Ukrainian messenger, for example.
Actually, the Ukrainian messenger, that's Lilika, and that's it. You can chat there as much as you want, cuckoo and coo. That's him? Actually, an artificial intelligence platform was created. They named it something like Lapat or something similar, but they created it. There's something there. It even responds, yes, it moves, so you can do the same here.
Is it true that it's absolutely uncontrolled? No, that's not true. And I really don't like it. And somehow, I don't like how even some of my friends write that knives are dangerous because you can kill with knives. So let's ban all knives. They should be at least somewhat controlled, at least to some extent.
Switching. I personally am very concerned that Fadina is dissatisfied, but honestly, if I compare my feelings about a distant dying star in a faraway galaxy and the fact that Fadina is upset, my sympathy and empathy are more directed toward that distant star, not toward Fadina. Anyway, I hope you understand. Well, that's basically it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and support it. By the way, there's a sponsorship program. If you haven't forgotten, you can become a sponsor there. Well, that's all for now. Bye, everyone.
The question was about helping with reconstruction after the war and that Russia wants to help.
They have to give us money. They can give us money. Money for this, and we will rebuild everything we need to rebuild, and we will decide what to do.